Arin paused at the center of the ruin, eyes narrowing as he traced the familiar outlines of the valley he had known since childhood, a valley that had once been a cradle of laughter, of running barefoot through warm soil, of chasing fireflies beneath lantern-lit nights where music floated like smoke, but now all that remained were memories he feared were slipping away like sand through trembling fingers, and as he knelt to touch the soot-covered ground, his gloved hand trembled, for beneath the ash he felt the faint warmth of something that should not still be warm, a heartbeat of the land itself, as if the earth refused to die even after everything had been taken from it. The sky above glowed with the dying embers of a sun imprisoned behind heavy clouds, casting a reddish tint that turned the smoke into bloody veils, swaying in the cold breath of dusk, and Arin felt that same coldness seep into his bones, reminding him of the night the fire came, the night the world shattered. He remembered the screams first, high, desperate cries that cut through the peaceful dark like jagged glass, then the blinding glow as the trees ignited all at once, not naturally, never naturally, for fire did not move like that, did not roar like a living creature awakened by hatred. He remembered clutching his little sister's hand, dragging her through the chaos as flames chased them like hunting wolves, heat scorching their backs while sparks bit into their skin, and still he ran until his legs nearly broke, until he could no longer hear the cries of others, only his sister's trembling breaths and the thunderous beat of his heart begging him not to stop. But even as he ran, he had known he could not outrun everything, for something stood behind that fire, something unseen but felt, something whose presence made the air vibrate with dread. Arin stood now, years later, staring at the remains of that same valley, his jaw clenched, fists hardening with the kind of anger that grows not from hatred but from grief left to rot too long inside the chest. He breathed deeply, letting the scent of smoke sting his lungs, letting the memories return not to break him but to remind him why he had come back. He had wandered for years, following rumors, half-truths, whispers carried through frightened towns about a shadow that consumed forests, a force that laid waste to villages overnight, and he knew, he always knew, that the same darkness that burned his home was still moving, still searching, still hungry. It was said that this entity, this walker of ash, left no footprints, no shape, no voice, only destruction, as if it were not a creature but an emotion, a concentrated will of malice that could set the world ablaze simply by existing. And though people feared it, though they fled its path, one thing was certain: it had a purpose, a destination, and Arin feared that purpose would soon reach the heart of the world if no one stood against it. As he stepped deeper into what used to be his childhood sanctuary, he felt a tug at his senses, something subtle, like tiny threads of energy pulling at him from different directions, guiding his attention to strange patterns in the ash, spirals, lines, symbols he had never seen before but sensed were not random. They pulsed faintly, almost like they breathed, and when he brushed his fingers across one, the ground hummed beneath him, and visions erupted in his mind, flashes of towering flames shaped like figures, shadows moving between them, voices whispering in languages older than memory, and a single eye opening within the inferno, watching him with an intelligence that was cold, ancient, and terrifying. He staggered back, clutching his head as the vision faded, gasping for air while the valley around him seemed to tilt and warp, before settling once more into grim stillness. But he had seen enough to confirm his fear. The fire that destroyed his home had not simply passed through, it had marked this place, claimed it, and perhaps claimed him as well, for he could feel something simmering beneath his skin, a dormant spark that pulsed in rhythm with the symbols at his feet. He had felt this strange warmth before, during moments of danger, moments when he should have died but didn't, moments when the world seemed to slow, and a glow ignited within his veins like molten gold, power he did not understand, power he feared was connected to the very force he sought to destroy. The wind shifted suddenly, swirling ash into spiraling ghosts that rose and dispersed through the air, and Arin's attention snapped toward the ridge overlooking the valley, where he thought he saw movement, something tall, thin, draped in tattered smoke, observing him with a stillness that froze the breath in his throat. His hand instinctively reached for the hilt of his blade, though he doubted steel would matter against something made of fire and shadow, but before he could take a step, the figure dissolved into the air, leaving only the faint hiss of embered soil cooling beneath invisible footsteps. Arin exhaled shakily, knowing now without question that he was not alone in this valley, even if nothing visible stood before him. As he steadied himself, a quiet determination hardened inside him, the kind that had pushed him through every hardship, every lonely night, every unanswered question. He had returned here not simply to relive the past, but to confront the force that had tried to erase everything he loved. And as he gazed across the ruined land, he whispered a vow, one that belonged not only to the boy he once was but to the world trembling under the threat of the coming fire, that he would follow the trail of ash to its source, no matter how dark the path, no matter what secrets he uncovered about the flames within himself. The Walker of Ash had taken his home, his family, his childhood, but it had not taken his will. And as he turned toward the mountains where its presence was strongest, he felt a familiar fire spark inside his chest, not one of destruction, but one of resistance, of purpose, of a destiny he was only beginning to understand. And to all who listened to his story, to all who walked beside him through every twist of fate, he silently hoped they would carry the flame with him, stand beside him, and if they wished to see how far this journey would go, to join him, support him, and subscribe so they could witness the rise from ashes to destiny, for this was only the beginning, and the fire that remembers had much more to tell. The mountains loomed like ancient guardians carved from the bones of the world, their jagged peaks cutting through the darkening sky like the teeth of a slumbering beast, and as Arin approached their base, the air grew heavier, thicker, infused with a heat that seemed unnatural for the cold season, as though the stones themselves exhaled the memory of flames long extinguished yet never forgotten. Even the wind, usually sharp and biting at this altitude, carried a strange warmth that brushed against his face like the breath of something watching him, testing his resolve. He pressed on, boots crunching against gravel that glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, emitting sparks each time his foot met the ground, for the mountain was not like ordinary stone, it was alive with traces of ember veins embedded deep within its heart, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to sync with the heartbeat pounding in Arin's chest, as if both man and mountain shared a buried secret neither fully understood. The climb grew steeper, each step demanding more strength, more breath. But Arin welcomed the burn in his muscles, for it meant he was moving closer, not only to the truth but to the confrontation he had prepared for his entire life. As he ascended, memories resurfaced like ghosts marching through the fog of his mind, his mother's gentle smile as she braided his sister's hair by the hearth, his father's strong hands guiding his small ones as he learned to carve wood into little figurines, the playful laughter of children echoing across the valley in the golden glow of summer, all swallowed now by the monstrous inferno that had ripped their world apart. These memories were both blade and shield, sharp enough to cut into him but strong enough to push him forward, and with every breath, he repeated silently the promise he had made amidst the ashes. He would not allow the same fate to befall another village, another family, another child. The winds howled suddenly with a shrillness that made his ears ring, and Arin realized it was not merely the natural cry of the night. Woven into the gale was something else, a whisper, a voice so faint it felt like a thought not entirely his own, speaking words he could not decipher, yet their tone chilled him more than any winter gust could. He paused, scanning the surroundings, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his blade, though he knew steel was a mere comfort against forces born from fire and shadow. The moon slipped behind thick clouds, plunging the mountainside into darkness, and for a moment, Arin felt completely alone, until a dim glow flickered ahead, like a candle beckoning from within a cavern. Cautiously, he followed it, heart thundering, senses sharpened, and soon he saw what produced the light, a cave entrance, wide and arched, its edges carved with symbols matching those he had seen burnt into the valley floor, symbols that seemed to writhe subtly as though alive, responding to his presence. When he stepped inside, the temperature surged, wrapping around him like a suffocating embrace, and the glow intensified, coming not from any torch or flame but from the cave walls themselves, lined with crystal-like formations that pulsed with internal fire, illuminating the path in hues of molten gold and deep crimson. The cave seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with quiet groans that vibrated through the stone, and Arin's steps echoed as though the mountain listened, judged, remembered. As he ventured deeper, a vast chamber opened before him, its ceiling lost in darkness, its floor a mirror of glowing embers swirling beneath a veil of translucent stone, giving the illusion that the very earth held a river of fire beneath his feet. And at the center of this fiery expanse lay an altar, ancient, cracked, yet radiating an aura of authority and power that made Arin's skin prickle. Upon it rested an object, or rather, something shaped like an object yet unmistakably alive, a heart forged of fire, beating with slow, heavy thuds that sent ripples across the molten river, illuminating the chamber in rhythmic bursts. Arin staggered backward, breath caught in his throat, as visions assaulted him once more, visions of the world long before humans walked upon it, when colossal beings of flame roamed freely, shaping mountains and carving rivers with their fiery steps, beings revered and feared, beings whose power could birth forests or destroy continents. Among them, one had rebelled, a fire spirit consumed not by creation but by hunger, a being who devoured light instead of giving it, turning entire landscapes into wastelands of ash, until the others imprisoned it deep beneath these mountains, sealing its heart away to starve it into eternal slumber. But something had changed. The heart, once dormant, had awakened, pulsing, calling, searching, and the Walker of Ash was the echo of that awakening, a fragment of the ancient beast's consciousness that wandered the world in search of fuel to restore its true form. Arin collapsed to one knee, overwhelmed by the truth, by the realization that the fire which had destroyed his home was not a random tragedy but part of a much larger resurrection, one that would consume everything if not stopped. And then he felt it, the warmth within him flaring, responding to the heart, calling back to it, as though they shared a connection forged on the night his village burned. His breath shook as understanding dawned. He had survived the fire because it had chosen him, touched him, marked him, leaving behind a spark of its own essence within him. But instead of corrupting him, that spark had fought against its origin, seeking purpose, seeking redemption through him. The heart throbbed faster as if recognizing its missing fragment within him, and the chamber trembled, stones cracking, embers rising in whirlwinds as though the mountain itself began to awaken. Arin forced himself to stand, gripping his blade though it felt insignificant before such power, and he shouted above the deafening hum, not in fear but in defiance, declaring that he would not be the vessel of destruction but the instrument of its end. His words carried through the chamber, and in response, the flames within his body surged, not in pain but in unity, as though aligning with his will rather than the ancient malice. The chamber exploded in brightness, the altar cracking, the heart splitting open as a colossal shape began to rise from within, a being of smoke and molten fire, with eyes like burning suns, awakening fully after centuries of forced slumber. Arin stood his ground, tiny against the titanic presence, yet unbroken, and in that moment, he felt the spark within him ignite into a flame of its own, not destructive, but defiant, courageous, pure. He knew the battle ahead would decide the fate of every living soul, that the world now stood on the edge of rebirth or annihilation, and he vowed that he would not let the fire claim another innocent life. And if others wished to witness the clash between destiny and devastation, to follow the rise of a lone survivor into the guardian the world desperately needed, then he welcomed them to walk this path with him, to join him, to support his journey, to subscribe and stay close, for the story was far from over, and the greatest flames were yet to be lit.